Hello everybody and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You are here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today we're talking about the Tricky Terrain Precon Upgrade Guide. This is the last of those Precon Upgrade Guides. I'm very excited and glad how this series went. And next up, I'm going to be doing decks about all of the co-commanders. So if you're interested in seeing how any of those would be built, please stay tuned for that. But let's dive in and look at those commanders we have here. Oma, Queen of Vesuva, and Jyoti, Mog Ascendant. Two very cool cards here, but I think we're going to stick to with Oma here as the co-commander, but we'll talk about both of them. Oma, Queen of Vesuva, 2 in a hybrid green-blue, legendary creature Shapeshifter Noble. When Oma, Queen of Vesuva enters the battlefield or attacks, put an everything counter on each of up to one target land and one target creature. Each land with an everything counter on it is every land type in addition to its other types, and each non-land creature with an everything counter on it is every creature type. So our shapeshifter here just turns other things also into shapeshifters, including our lands, which is a really fun effect. There's some really cool lands that gain some huge benefit from this effect, especially those Urza lands, so this is very fun. And then Jyoti, Mog Ancient, 2 green and a blue legendary creature elemental with when Jyoti, Mog Ancient enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green forest dryad land creature token for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. Then at the beginning of each combat, land creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Jyoti's power. So your goal here is to cast your commander as many times as possible, essentially this being the commander if you're playing with it as the commander. Then it buffs up all land creatures based on Jyoti's power. So very cool set of cards here. Like I said, we're going to start with Oma as the commander because I think it's better. And so the way this upgrade guide is going to go is I'm going to very quickly read through all the new cards. If you want to stop and read them, go right ahead. But I'm going to go through all the cards I think you should cut and why, and then a bunch of really cool cards I think you could add to the deck. So let's read through those new cards here with Aggressive Biomancy, Copy Land, Desert Warfare, Horizon of Progress, Lazotep Quarry, March from Velis Vel, Planar Nexus, Rampant Frogantula, Sage of the Maze, Sunken Palace, Talon Gates of Madara, Trench Post, and Wonderscape Sage. We got some pretty cool cards here. We got the most lands. Obviously, this is a land deck, and the best lands, I would say, in this deck, so I'm very excited about that. So starting out by looking at those cards you should cut, we have Chromatic Lantern, Desert of the Indomitable, and Desert of the Mindful. So something I thought was real weird with having Chromatic Lantern in this deck is why. I mean, there's a lot of great effects that we want to be tapping certain lands for certain types of mana, so why would I give up, you know, an Urza land to tap for 1 colorless mana? There aren't any spells in here that I think are too mana restrictive, you know, having 3 or 4, you know, pips of one certain color. But certainly we have so many search effects, and there are just so many wide variety of cards land-wise in this deck. I just don't think Chromatic Lantern in this 2-color deck makes any sense at all. Similarly, I don't know why they decided to include these 2 deserts. Both of these enter the battlefield tapped. You can cycle them, so I guess that's okay. They tap to add, you know, 1 color. There's a lot of really great deserts out there that maybe can do some other things. But honestly, you know, we have some things that care about deserts, and we can make deserts with our commander, so there's no need to add tapped lands that are going to slow you down, especially in a deck that wants to ramp super quickly and play some really big spells. This is just going to slow you down, and I think they should be cut. So the next 3 cards to look at here are Evacuation, Jyoti, Mog, Ancient, and Lumbering Falls. Unfortunately, the co-commander does not fit in this deck unless you're specifically playing it, so I think that it just needs to go. But Evacuation, 3 blue instant, return all creatures to their owner's hands. This just, I don't think is very good. We have so many landfall triggers that are going to make a ton of tokens in this deck that I think returning all creatures is just going to be a huge detriment to us. You know, we have Rampaging Baloths, Scoot Swarm, and Avenger of Zendikar that all care about keeping those tokens on the board, so I really don't understand why this sort of spell is here versus like an Aetherize to just bounce all creatures that are attacking you. It just doesn't make any sense there. Jyoti here, like I said, if you're not playing land creatures, I don't think there's really any point in playing him. And then Lumbering Falls, again, is a land creature. It can turn into a land for 4 mana, and it's just a 3/3 with hexproof. We don't really have anything to equip onto him to make it worthwhile to swing in, so I think unless you're playing Jyoti, you should also remove this. So then lastly here, we have Oblivion Stone, Simic Guildgate, and Sunken Palace. Oblivion Stone here, 3 artifact, 4 in tap, put a fate counter on target permanent, 5 in tap, sack it, destroy each non-land permanent without a fate counter on it, then remove all fate counters from all permanents. I don't really see this board wipe working too well in this deck for the same reason I said get evacuation out of there. We have a lot of tokens. There's no way we're going to be able to put enough fate counters on all of our stuff to keep all that. I would put Oblivion Stone in a deck where you have 1 or 2 creatures you want to keep on the board at one time, and you can just wipe the board to keep them safe and kill everybody else's stuff. But otherwise, just doesn't make any sense here. Simic Guildgate, similarly to the deserts, this enters tapped. Yes, it's a gate. Yes, it taps for, 2 colors, but we could just turn any land into a gate. So if you're really that worried, play it, but if not, just cut it. And then Sunken Palace, land, cave, Sunken Palace enters battlefield tapped. Tap to add a blue mana, then for 1 and a blue, tap, exile 7 cards from your graveyard and add a blue mana. When you spend mana to cast a spell, activate an ability, copy that spell or ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. Now, I don't necessarily think this is bad, right? I think this is actually a pretty decent card. The one thing I'm going to say, though, is I added some mill effects into this deck, or other ways to put lands into your bin, but there are really very few ways to fill up your bin very quickly in this deck. Yeah, there's some search effects with lands, and yeah, there's some instant sorceries you can cast, but for the most part, unless you're just purposefully, blocking with your creatures to get them into the bin to activate this ability, I just don't think Sunken Palace here as the card I would want. It enters tapped. It's going to cost you 2 mana because you get a mana back, basically from doing this, and you can copy stuff. I would actually like this a lot better if you didn't have to spend mana to cast or activate an ability. As long as you could just copy an activated ability, I think maybe you copy your commander, get a double up effect of that or whatever. I think that would actually be a better effect here. So I just don't like it, and I just cut it. So let's move right in and look at those new cards now. I have a couple different categories based on some different ways you can go about building, but I think it was pretty clear first off what you should do is doubling up your commander effect or making sure they get through. So we have Aqueous Form, Roaming Throne, and Shrionic Resonator. Aqueous Form, make it so your commander can't be blocked, so you can freely attack every turn. You get to scry in the process, so it's a little added bonus, but for 1 blue, you can't beat it. And that will ensure that we get to put an everything counter on a land and creature every turn. Then we have the Roaming Throne, 4 generic artifact creature golem with ward 2. When it enters, choose a creature type. In this case, I would probably pick Shapeshifter, even though I don't think there are any other Shapeshifters in the deck necessarily, unless you put in everything counter on a creature, then they become Shapeshifters, and this gets so much better. And if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So yeah, basically making any of your creatures a shapeshifter will double up their effects as well, which is really strong. And then we have Shrionic Resonator, 2 generic artifact, 2 tap, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose a new target for the copy. So the triggered ability is going to be our attack trigger or possibly your ETB trigger. Just for the cost of 2 mana, getting to double up your effect every turn. Seems pretty great. So now let's look at another type of card I want to look at, which I think works particularly well in this deck, is domain cards. Domain cards care about all the basic land types, and putting an everything counter on a land is going to make it every land type. So that's a very good way to be able to take advantage of these effects. So first off, we have Collective Restraint, Draco, and Herd Migration. Collective Restraint is 3 and a blue enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays X for each creature attacking you, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Putting 1 everything counter means we have 5, meaning right off the bat, they have to pay 5 for each attacking creature, which is, I think, is one of the strongest blue ghostly prison effects like this. So I think that's very powerful and is probably going to keep your opponents at bay unless they can generate an insane amount of mana. Draco here is 16 mana. Draco costs 2 less to play for each basic land among lands you control. It has flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sack it unless you pay 10, and this is reduced by 2 for each land among land types you control. Again, we have the 5 basics with just the everything counter, making this 6 mana to play. We have to pay 0 on upkeep, so a 6 mana, 9/9 with flying, seems really strong. And then a Herd Migration, 6 and a green domain, create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control, so 7 mana for 15 power. Seems okay, especially spread across 5 creatures. Then for 1 and a green, discard this card, search for a basic land card, reveal it, put in your hand, shuffle, and you gain 3 life. So not a bad second ability there either, so seems good to me. So the next 3 domain cards we have is Prismatic Geoscope, Scion of Draco, and Sphinx of the Clear Skies. Prismatic Geoscope is 5. Generic artifact, it enters battlefield tapped, but domain, tap and add X mana of any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is the number of basic lands among lands you control. Yes, this is a little bit more pricey as a 5-drop mana rock, but what I like about that is you're getting 5 mana basically every turn with an everything counter on a land. This seems pretty good, paying for its cost, and then the second turn, just doubling seems very, very good, especially these bigger mana rocks. These are going to help us cast those big spells like Scion of Draco. 12 mana artifact creature dragon with domain. This costs 2 less cast for each basic land you control, so essentially 2. Then it has flying, and each creature you control has vigilance if it's white, hexproof if it's blue, lifelink if it's black, first strike if it's red, and trample if it's green. So we're going to be giving hexproof and trample, which are 2 really powerful effects. Then Sphinx of the Clear Skies, 3 blue creature Sphinx, flying and ward 2 with domain. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal X cards from the top of your library, where X is the number of basic lands types among lands you control. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, put 1 pile in your hand and the other into your graveyard. This is essentially a free factor fiction every turn. Seems very good. You're going to get some good card draw, you're going to put some stuff in the bin, and we have some ways to get that back, so there's no worries there. So the next section I'm going to look at and talk about a little bit more is Urza lands specifically, because that is one of the most powerful effects that Oma here is going to be giving, is these Urza lands, because an everything counter puts an Urza land effect onto the board, meaning if you have any of those Urza lands that count other Urza lands, you'll be able to generate a massive amount of mana that way. In addition, some other Urza lands you can add to this deck to help with that effect are Urza's Cave, Urza's Saga, and Urza's Workshop. So Urza's Cave, brand new, you can tap it to add a colorless mana, or 3 tap, sack it, search your library for a land, put on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This card is pretty cheap right now, going for $1. I can see these going up, so I would pick up a few of these if this was an effect you like. Then we have Urza Saga. This is a staple card. 1, taps it. Saga point 1, it taps to add a colorless mana. 2, you can pay 2 to create a construct that gets bigger with each artifact you control. Then 3, when you sack this, you get to go look for an artifact with 0 or 1 and put on the battlefield. Very, very powerful effect. This is a staple card. It's right around like $40-ish, so it's not priced for everyone. If you're getting into more competitive matches, this is maybe a card you want to pick up a copy of. And then Urza's Workshop, tap it to add a colorless or magecraft, add a colorless mana for each Urza land you control, activate only if you control 3 or more artifacts. We certainly have some artifacts in this deck, so that shouldn't be too hard, and it can be a very powerful way in order to tap for a ton of mana. So next, let's look up some other ways to search for lands, because interestingly, I found that was a very missing part of this deck. Obviously, you want to search for all of your best lands in order to get those everything counter effects, and really, there just wasn't as many good effects here as you would want in order to do that in this deck. So, starting out, we have Archdruid's Charm, Crop Rotation, and Elvish Reclaimer. Archdruid's Charm, very powerful card from Murder at Karlov Manor. You can choose one here, search your library for a creature or land, reveal it, put on the battlefield tapped if it's a land, otherwise put it into your hand. You can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control, and then exile target artifact or enchantment. Very versatile spell, but getting that land is why we need it here. Crop Rotation, single green instant. You can play this, but when you do, you have to sack a land. Then you can search your library for a land and put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Certainly one of the strongest search lands ever printed, especially if you're playing landfall decks, because it comes right into the battlefield and untapped. So whatever you just searched up, it better be your best land, because it's definitely worth it to sack any land to get your best land out of your deck. Then we have Elvish Reclaimer, single green, creature, elf, warrior. It gets +2/+2 for as long as there are 3 or more lands in your graveyard, and then 2 and tap, sacrifice a land, search your library for a land card, put on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. You can see just how much better Crop Rotation is when you compare it to a card like this, which is also very powerful, letting you search for any land, but it comes in tapped, and you essentially have to pay 3 mana to do so. So first off here, we have Reshape the Earth, Scape Shift, and Tempt with Discovery. Reshape the Earth is 6 green sorcery. Search your library for up to 10 land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Very expensive spell, but honestly, if you have a couple Urza lands and a couple untapped green forests, hey, this becomes a very easy spell to cast. Similarly, Scape Shift here is a sorcery that says sack any number of lands. Search your library for that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, tapped, then shuffle. You know, you're going to want to keep those everything lands, I think, around in order to get that effect. But you can just stack all your other lands and get a bunch onto the board, triggering a ton of landfall effects. And this next category we're going to talk about after this last card is going to make sure we can get all those back. But then we have Tempt with Discovery, 3 and a green sorcery, Tempting Offer. Search your library for a land card, put on the battlefield. Then each opponent may search their library for a land, put on the battlefield, and for each opponent who searched this way, you may search for a land card and put on the battlefield. Then each player who searched their library this way shuffles. So first off, you get a land of any type. For 4 mana, that's pretty bad. But if your opponents also search, you also get a land for each of one of those players that search. So essentially, you could pull out all your Urza lands, a bunch of locusts, a ton of gates, whatever you want. They don't enter the battlefield tapped, you know, unless they otherwise say so. And I think this is a very cool card. You know, most of the time, I think, especially early in the game, most players, if you can play this, will search with you, letting you ramp very, very powerfully. But like I said earlier, this last category here is going to be returning those lands to the battlefield because obviously we have some better effects now to search for some more lands. Let's get them onto the battlefield. So starting out, we have Aftermath Analyst, Splendid Reclamation, and World Shaper. Aftermath Analyst is 1 and a green creature elf detective with when it enters, you mill 3 cards. Then for 3 and a green, sack it to return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Yeah, that seems pretty great. We get to mill, we have a creature on the board, then we can sack it and return all those lands we destroyed from Scapeshift or used in order to get some of our better lands out. Then we have Splendid Reclamation, 3 and a green sorcery, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Very simple and powerful, so it's in here. And then World Shaper, 3 and a green creature, Merfolk Shaman, with whenever it attacks, you may mill 3 cards. Then when it dies, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. All of these very similar, but all very powerful effects. You know, you want to put a couple of these in here because you're probably only going to draw one of these a game unless you're drawing an absurd amount of cards. So having some duplicate effects is very powerful. But I just want to say thank you so much for watching. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, you know, this last deck upgrade guide. Like I mentioned before, I'm really doing the other co-commanders later this week, so stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to build those, and I hope you've enjoyed this video series. But leave a comment down below what you think. Are there cards that you think I should include or also remove from this deck that I didn't? In addition, if you would share this with a friend, leave a like and subscribe. That would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Energy Arc. Relent and you may transcend your situation. Gerda Exudator, Archmage of the Unseen. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.